go. Looks like everything is all set. Alright. Hey everyone, Steven here. Well, you probably already know who I am at this point. Welcome to the Tostemac Livestreams. I know it's been a while since I did one of these Saturday live streams, but the past couple of months have been pretty hectic, to say the least. So, we'll give it a few more minutes before we get started with today's topic, which is talking about more about self-diagnosis. So, while we're giving it a few minutes for people to show up, I do want to update on a couple things. One is, for the Chow Garden live stream tomorrow, I'm going to try my best to start at around 5 p.m. like usual, but I can't guarantee anything because we've actually been invited to a barbecue tomorrow, so want to take the time to enjoy that. So rest assured, there will be a Chow Garden live stream tomorrow. I just don't know when exactly. I'm going to try to get it as close to 5 p.m. as possible, but I make no promises. Now, the second thing is in regards to the Mediterranean diet. I haven't done an update on that in a while, so I may as well. So, in terms of weight-wise, I'm able to keep the weight below 210, which is good. But for some reason, my weight loss is kind of stagnated. Maybe it's because I need to make some adjustments in the foods I eat for the Mediterranean diet. But I'm making sure to drink enough water as needed, because before the diet, I wasn't drinking nearly enough of this. The other thing is that I'm adding strength exercises to my routines. Up until recently, I've just done like mobility exercises, to make sure I'm more flexible. But the strength exercises is what helps burn the fat and, builds muscle. But the thing is, like, with the strength exercises, since you're exchanging fat for muscles, what's happening is the weight loss isn't going to be that much because you're not just losing weight anymore, you're gaining strength, So it was kind of frustrating to me at first, but like I'm starting to get used to the strength exercises, and Lord knows my back muscles need them badly. So so that's pretty much what I have there. I may have to make some other adjustments, but I have been noticing a couple of changes, one of which is my waistline is getting smaller, my potbelly is getting much smaller. So it's not like I'm making no progress. I am. It's just my older brother mentioned that at some point it might feel like there's like very little progress, but don't be discouraged by that. Just keep working, So, yeah, that's basically the updates on that. All right, so without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about today's autism subject, or from the autism video earlier about, self-diagnosis. I gotta be honest, at first, when I first heard about, self-diagnosis, I didn't really think too much of it. I thought it was like, like if you want the services, you get the official diagnosis, end of story. It was like, that was kind of like how I felt on the matter, because the big thing was that I wasn't really sure if self-diagnosis had any form of validity in it. I was concerned that it was just like anyone saying that they're autistic, because of one trait or another, But it's like, as I was doing, first what I did was I posted a question on social media groups about, like, what they think about official diagnosis or self-diagnosis. I was worried that I was going to start, like, a major argument, like if it was, like, a comment section of Twitter or something like that. But thankfully, I didn't deal with too much trouble with it. So what happened is that while there were a lot of comments that mentioned that, they prefer official diagnosis, there have been a few here and there that talked about self-diagnosis. And as I was reading those comments, because, like, I felt like since I was on the side of, like, official diagnosis, I felt like I was going to gain more from the comments that said self-diagnosis rather than, the side that I already agreed with. So as I was reading the comments talking about self-diagnosis, they were talking about their personal experience about the matter. Like, it helped helped give them answers. It gave them a sense of closure, and that like they feel more confident about themselves because they were able to figure out that these traits could be linked to autism, and they actually felt better because they did the self-diagnosis and did the research, understood what autism is, and to kind of get the connections and get the answers, how it made them happier and understand themselves better. In fact, there were other comments that said it started out as a self-diagnosis first and then moved to an official diagnosis. And when I read those comments like that, it kind of brought me back to when me and Mom were talking about, my official diagnosis. We covered this a little bit about the back when we did the podcast about, autism in the 90s. And she was talking about how she was able to see the signs that I'm autistic, and she was able to figure it out long before the medical experts brought in their box of tissues to deliver the news. So now you could argue that, my mom's in the medical field. She's probably been trained, to spot details like that. She takes care of people all the time. True, but here's my argument. In the 90s, they didn't know nearly as much about autism as we do now. So back then, it wasn't exactly easy to spot, You really had to know what it is you were looking for at the time, And besides, the internet wasn't really that big in the 90s either, so it's not like we could just look up any information on there as we can now. So the thing is, like, I started to think that, okay, maybe there's something to this, like self-diagnosis can give you more confidence, and like, a self-diagnosis can be translated into an official diagnosis because you already know what it is you're looking at. Rather than just going to the medical expert and trying to figure out whatever, you actually go to the medical expert with the information you found and went like, okay, so I've seen A, B, C, and D. What's next? God, there's just something stuck in my throat today. So anyway, so that started to get me think. But then there was one particular comment, that sounded a little rude at first, but like when I started to read the context, it started to click. It started to make sense. Now, I'm not going to mention who made the comment or like go over the comment exactly, but the main thing that kind of caught my eye on that particular comment was it was talking about privilege. And what they mean by that is like, like having a good enough financial situation, being at the right place, like the right state or the right country, because not all countries, treat autism equally. So like there's money, there's also location, there's also like, access to the resources and stuff in the first place. And it's like, when I first read the privilege part, I was kind of irked by that. But as I was reading the comment more and more about, like how self-diagnosis can be beneficial if you don't have access to this, and that was actually the part where I started to become invested in the subject. That was the tipping point that brought me over the fence and got me thinking, okay, maybe there is something to this, Because, like, as I was reading this comment, I looked at, my situation, like, my family's in a good financial position. I was able to, get the official diagnosis at a very young age, and my family was able to get the right resources. But if you think about it, not everybody is so fortunate. There are some people that might not have the spare money to do an official diagnosis, or go from place to place, to look for possible resources. And heaven forbid that you would have to move from one state to another just to get the resources that you can't in the current state you're in, It's those things that, that many of us kind of take for granted. But when you really think about it, there are some of us that are, as much as I hate to say it, that are in a more fortunate position than others. But those in the less fortunate position, like, what are they supposed to do? So, so it was like thinking about that person mentioning privilege and thinking about, like, how self-diagnosis has benefited quite several people, in terms of like helping them find answers and get that validation. That was the point when I really started to dive deep into this subject. So the next thing that came to mind was like, okay, how do I tackle it though? Because I can't just choose one side or the other. There's like ups and downs to both ends. So I did some research, not so much, like I did a little bit of research on the official diagnosis part because I was familiar with that already, but I did most of my research on self-diagnosis since that was the area that I myself was not too familiar with, like just because my mom was able to diagnose before an official diagnosis, that doesn't really make us an expert on self-diagnosis. So as I was reading more and more articles in terms of like self-diagnosis, the more I became intrigued about like how much is involved. Like, with the internet, we have access to all kinds of information, so it's not like we can't put the pieces together ourselves. And there's also, oh, hey, Meep, how's it going? Hope you're having a good weekend. So Meep writes, I think it is true that it is very difficult to obtain a diagnosis in some circumstances. I think, though, that it is strange that it is used as a justification to self-diagnosis with just a narrow. I can see that. To be used as a justification for self-diagnosis. That's interesting. Like maybe it could be seen as a justification. Me personally, based on what I found, I think maybe self-diagnosis is less about justification and more like trying to figure out, trying to find answers to questions like, why am I different? Why are things about me are the way they are? I think it's more like in the sense of finding answers. And I actually mentioned this in the autism video, is that what it ultimately boils down to, like each side has their ups and downs, like the big thing of what it boils down to me at least, is like, what is it that you're after? Are you looking for answers and like social connections, or are you looking for services and external accommodations? It kind of boils down to that. It's just a self-diagnosis, just a narrow subset of diagnosis. But when it comes to diagnosis that can be just as hard to obtain, but that don't come with a superpower or a quirky ability. I wish I had a superpower. Like, if you had a superpower, what superpower would it be? Me, I'm kind of stuck between invisibility and teleportation. People don't tend to push for self-diagnosis for being acceptable. No one is advocating for self-diagnosis of intellectual disability, for example. I guess it all depends on like how you're finding. I guess it all depends on like what you define as like being acceptable in terms of official diagnosis. Like if it's just for like, building self-confidence, that's okay. However, if you're trying to use a self-diagnosis to get access to services like IEP or like financial assistance or stuff like that, you're not really going to be so fortunate because like, when it comes to trying to get services based on a disability you may be having, more often than not, the organization in question is going to ask, okay, where's the paperwork? Where are the documents? Because they can't just take your word for it. So, like, in that sense, a self-diagnosis being acceptable to get access to resources, that's going to be a very difficult, if not impossible, argument to make. Because, like, in that sense, if people if the people in charge of organizations giving resources for disabilities, if they were to just take someone's word for it, if they could just accept a self-diagnosis, then in theory that would mean everybody would have access to the resources because anyone can just say it, you know? So in terms of using a self-diagnosis to get access to services, I think that's a little far-fetched. Like, don't get me wrong, based on the research I've done, sorry for the broken up comments, character limit. No, it's okay. That's perfectly fine. Like, I had to deal with it too a few times. But yeah, you do bring up some valid points. Um, so like, as I was doing, sorry, let me get my words right. It's like using a self-diagnosis as a means to get resources. It seems definitely a stretch, but at the same time, there are some benefits to a self-diagnosis, like since you're not going through multiple sessions or having to be in a wait list, which can take forever, it could definitely save a lot of time and money. But at the same time, that does fall on you to, be responsible enough to do thorough research and being honest with yourself. Like, you can't just say, I'm autistic because of this, and that, but then you ignore this part that could mean a different disability, Like, if you're not 100% honest with yourself, then you're going to get to the wrong answer, which is probably why, some people would have concerns about, like, a self-diagnosis, because, like, if you don't do your homework, how are you going to get to the right answer? Which is one of the benefits of speaking to a doctor who's been trained in this area. They can look at parts that, you might not want to admit, or maybe you didn't even know existed. So in order to do a diagnosis, whether it be official or self, you need to look at all the different aspects, not just focus on like a couple points that may point to this, So it was one of those rare moments, like doing this topic was one of those rare moments where it's like I was wrong about something and I was actually happy to be wrong about it, Like, I used to think that, it was just official diagnosis or no diagnosis. But now, I've gained this better understanding of why some people would do a self-diagnosis, because maybe they don't have access to the things they need. Maybe it's just a tough financial situation. There was a lot more to this topic than I initially thought. And I actually enjoy that, believe it or not, because it means that there is more to this life. There is more to this world than what I possibly thought of, that maybe I took for granted. That perhaps there is this possibility, that, things can change over time, that there is like more to the book that just meets the cover. I like those kind of situations because, it opens up new possibilities. I'm all for it. So, but yeah, Meep, if you're still in the chat, did you do an official diagnosis at some point, or do you know someone that does? Be happy to hear about it. Now, in terms of, like, knowing anyone who's done a self-diagnosis, I can't say I have. Because, like, every single individual I've met, like, every single friend that I've made, they went through the official diagnosis process. Some got it quicker, some got it slower, but they still got an official diagnosis. I never really met anyone who, I never met anyone in person that has like experience with like a self-diagnosis. But I think there was a comment on my video. Let's see. Here we are. So, the person that commented on my YouTube video that I posted earlier today said, I self-diagnosed after researching my son and 6 years later was able to be tested myself and got my official diagnosis. It is really a big deal to do it. I felt validated, and it was for sure. I was so happy to know that I'm not a broken or failed person, but instead part of a large tribe. In my opinion, it's a very worthwhile thing to do. So that was interesting. That was one of the instances where someone was self-diagnosed first, where they do a self-diagnosis first, and then later on go get tested. Oh. Meep says, I'm in a weird generational gap where they gave me special education but didn't have a place to label me. That was before even the outdated Asperger's was a thing. Now I would likely be ASD level 1. That's interesting. I've never really been in a situation like that. Didn't have a place to label. I mean, I wouldn't really know much about it, so there's not really much I can say about that. But, so now it'd likely be ASD level 1? Is level 1 the same as, high functioning, or is that low functioning? I've never heard of it referred to ASD level 1 before. Is that still playing on, the spectrum idea, or is it something new recently that I missed? But anyway, going back to what I was saying earlier. So, this person who commented on the video originally started this as, a self-diagnosis, doing some homework after researching her son. And then it means low support needs. Oh, okay. Now I get it. Yeah, I wonder if that's a new recent terminology, because I haven't heard that before, but I'm sure I can ask Mom. She probably knows about it. So, going back to what I was saying. So, she originally started out as a self-diagnosis after watching her son, and then went to the official diagnosis. That probably actually saves a lot of time if the person in question does their homework ahead of time. And that's another situation where a self-diagnosis could be viable, where you're trying to do as much homework as possible to make sure that you give the medical expert as much information as possible. Because at the end of the day, a medical expert's help is only as good as the information you provide them. If you don't provide them too much, then they kind of need to be poking around here and there, kind of taking a shot in the dark. But when you do your homework in advance, if you try to answer the questions on your own first, then what happens is you already have a bunch of information ready in advance, so that way the medical expert can go, okay, so we're at this point, but we need to figure out, here or there, but we have a sense of direction in which to go, So, that was another interesting situation. So, we'll probably go for a few more minutes. But yeah, it was one of those rare instances where I was I'm happy to be wrong, that there is more to this life than, what we initially thought, And there's nothing wrong with, learning something new. There's nothing wrong with, hearing about the other end of, the conversation, Because, even if you don't agree with what is being said on the other side, if you listen to what they're saying, then at the very least you could try to put together where they're coming from and if there's anything viable to what they're saying and all. So what I feel is that just because you don't agree with another person's opinion, that shouldn't automatically mean that you just block them out entirely without understanding their side. And just because you do your due diligence and research the matter and try to see what's part of the other side of the conversation, that doesn't necessarily mean you have to agree with them, And there was a certain saying, let's see if let me see if I can look it up. Here it is. So it was a philosopher by the name of Aristotle that said, "It is the mark of an educated mind to be able to entertain a thought without accepting it." So just because you listen to what other people say about a certain subject, that doesn't always mean you have to take it to heart right away, or that you automatically accept that what they're saying is the absolute undeniable truth. There's life is more complicated than that. So it's okay to have your own thoughts on the matter, your own opinions. But it's with this, I was still in the mindset of an official diagnosis. I preferred that because that's what happened with me. But now I know that not everyone has the... See, for lack of a better word, I don't know whether to say privilege or luxury, access. I should say access. Because not everybody is going to have the same access to, the medical experts and the resources that other people will. So each and every single family is going to have a different experience based on their situation. And thus, that means they will have different views on things. There are some people that can get an official diagnosis easily. There are some people that have to struggle for months, if not over a year, to get that diagnosis. Or maybe there are some people that, might not be able to get the diagnosis at all. And they're kind of left with the self-diagnosis because that's the only option available to them, So it was very interesting to listen to more about this. No, learn more about this topic. It's been a very long day. To learn more about the topic of self-diagnosis and official diagnosis, because of how much I've learned, how much benefits there are to a self-diagnosis. That it's not just a random person saying I'm autistic because whatever. No, that there actually is some validity to self-diagnosis, that there actually is some merit to it, and there are some actual benefits to go with a self-diagnosis. So, that's actually the reason why I left my autism video open-ended. So, I presented the ups and downs of an official diagnosis. I presented the ups and downs of a self-diagnosis, but ultimately I leave the choice up to the viewers, because again, as a content creator, I only give advice and information, and this was something new I was learning about myself. But, I don't feel like it's in my position in any way, shape, or form to tell other people, what they should or should not do. I don't really have the quote-unquote authority, to make that choice for other people. So I felt if I were to say, back then, if I were to say that, it's official diagnosis all the way and that there was nothing to self-diagnosis, that would not only be, an injustice to those who may not be able to get an official diagnosis for one reason or another, but it would also be out of ignorance, for lack of a better word. I think ignorance would be the best way to describe it, because you're making this choice, you're kind of jumping to a conclusion without really looking into the bigger picture, and as a result, since you're not getting the bigger picture, again, long day, since you're not seeing the bigger picture, there are going to be some major pieces of information that you're going to be leaving out. Whether it be intentional or accident, there are going to be parts that you missed because you jumped to a conclusion without considering the other side of the conversation. Oh, Meep says, thank you for making videos. Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I really like hearing your thoughts, and I appreciate that you make a point to practice perspective taking and that you don't claim to speak for an entire community. Yeah, thank you so much for that, Meep. And that's really an important point that you touched on. Not claiming to speak for an entire community, because a community. Oh, stupid phone. A community at the end of the day is not just you. It's not just it's not just the autistic community starring Stephen McAllister or just insert name and nobody else. No, a community is a group of people from different walks of life coming together with a similar interest and wanting to make a difference in each other's lives. So it's like, kind of like as you mentioned, me, in terms of like, not speaking for an entire community. That's kind of why I made the note where it's like, as a content creator, I only give advice, but that's not me. It's not my place to tell you what to do. Because, like, for me personally, I feel like I can only speak for myself, based on, my experience. And it's like, if I were to say that, I speak for an entire community, well, what authority exactly do I have with that? What would make me be able to speak for an entire community? Nothing, because I only know like a few people within the community, not the community as a whole. And even then, I can't speak on other people's behalf. They can speak for themselves just fine. Or if they can't speak in some cases, they can communicate just fine. I'm pretty sure they don't need me speaking for them. And the other thing about, practicing perspective taking, like, it's very important, but I will admit it is not easy to do, especially when it comes to more sensitive subjects that I will not bring up in this channel ever, or try my best not to. Perspective taking, it can be tough, especially if it involves like a personal belief that you hold near and dear to your heart, and if it's something you were raised about in a young age, it's going to be very difficult, to look at the other perspectives, it was certainly not easy for me at all, like there was like a time back when I was younger, I was like, this path's right and like other paths are wrong, I thought it was just black and white. But, as the years went by, as I was being shown all these different parts of the world, and like as I was going to like different events, you start to learn that there is more gray than like, just the black and white that many people would want, And it's that regardless of if your perspective aligns with others or not, the bottom line is we're all a part of this world, we all share it. So, sorry, let me get my words right. So in terms of like, perspective taking, as you learn about other perspectives and other ways of life, as you learn that there is more to this world than just the perspective that you have, that is how you will gain a better understanding of the world around you, but you will also gain a better understanding of yourself as well. And I think it kind of brings me back to one of the Kingdom Hearts games. I'm trying to remember. I believe it was Dream Drop Distance. And there was a little speech in there that mentions like, as we meet different people, as we see and meet different people, we see different reflections of ourselves. Maybe we see parts that we like, or maybe we see parts that we don't like. It's kind of like looking at different mirrors and showing the different reflections of ourselves, It's that we have this perspective about ourselves at first, but as you meet different people, as you see different walks of life, different cultures, you find that there is more complexities and that there is more to other people and yourself for that matter that you might not have even realized. Like maybe you meet these people and it's like, I never really had to think about this before. Or you meet other people like, I'm going to steer clear of that. So, like, perspective taking is not easy. I will admit that. But it requires that you actually get out there and, get out of your comfort zone to really see what it is out there. Because there's only so much that you'll be able to see within the confines of your comfort zone. If you never venture out of there, you're never going to grow, because you're not going to be able to see what is out there. Much like with this case. Like, I used to be like official diagnosis all the way, but now I know there is validity on both ends of the conversation. And that's because I took a moment to look at the bigger picture and see the different perspectives. Actually hear what both ends of the conversation had to say. And because of that, I feel like I've grown as as a person and as a content creator. And ultimately that's the biggest thing that's going to help you grow is that you step out of the comfort zone, you see what there is to see, and you accept that there are all different kinds of perspectives. And it's not just you, and it's not just your perspective always being right all the time. The world's more complex than that. Meep says, definitely. It took years of hard work to learn to intentionally try to do it. And I think your videos offer a great example of remembering to try to see more than one side. I appreciate that a lot. Well, thank you. Absolutely. I'm really glad that, for you to say that my videos are, like a great example of trying to see more than one side, and, like, perspective taking and whatnot, like, for you to say that my videos helps, it means a lot, if I make videos because, it's something I enjoy to do and it's something that's kind of fulfilling to me. And this is like what you just mentioned earlier. That's the reason why. If my videos can make a difference in people's lives, if my videos can help people, even if it's just like one or two at a time, then, that's great. I know I've done my job. Like, I know that the videos have done what they're supposed to do, So I really appreciate that, Meep. So thank you very much for, watching my videos and tuning in for the live stream for that matter. So I really appreciate that. It means a lot to me. So I think actually now is probably a pretty good point to wrap up because I got to play more Sonic Adventure 2 to get more rings for the Chow Garden live stream tomorrow. So, Meep, if you have time, I don't know if you do. If you have time and if you want to drop by to the Chow Garden live stream, which will be around tomorrow evening, I want to shoot for like 5 p.m. Mountain Time. I'm not sure when exactly, but I'll try to get to that as close as I can. But if you got the time, I'd love for you to drop by. It's a little something fun for us to do, That way it's not like just, talking about, educational stuff or different topics all the time. We like to mix things up a little bit here at Tostemac. So, but I got to get that grinding done so that way I have plenty of rings, so that way I'm not broke by the time the stream starts. But yeah, thank you for dropping by, Meep, and thank you all for watching this live stream, whether you're watching it live or you're watching it later and just commenting on it. So, of course, if you like what you see, don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the bell icon. But also, I would like to hear your perspectives on the matter. Like, what are your thoughts on, like, official diagnosis or self-diagnosis? Maybe you have experience with both. Or maybe you want to just talk about, what Meep was talking about in terms like, perspective taking and, to intentionally try to step out of the comfort zone and do different things, like any of that stuff, just let us know in the comment section below. So, with that, we're going to end the live stream. Thank you very much, Meep. I will try to have a great grind. So thank you very much for watching the live stream, and I really hope you can drop by to the Chow Garden live stream tomorrow. Viewers can get their own chow in the garden. So all you gotta do is drop by, say you want to chow, then boom, you gotta chow. But until then, thank you very much for watching the live stream. And until the next one, which is hopefully tomorrow at 5 p.m., I will try to get the close. Until then, see you later.